The course now moves to southern Asia, the home of the modern-day countries of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. And what we're going to do today is focus on the very, very, very first civilization in this area, which, it should be no surprise to you, started in a river valley, specifically this one over here that you see my little laser pointer on. You can even see on this map today how this area is more green than the areas around it. There is a river right here called the Indus River that flows through modern-day Pakistan. You can tell today the effect that it has on the vegetation of the area, and it is in this area that we will have our first civilization in this part of the world. And we'll call this the Indus Valley Civilization. Here's a close-up map of exactly where they were. Again, this is roughly modern-day Pakistan. They're along the Indus River Valley here. These were the cities that we've recovered today that were part of this civilization. And we know that they traded. They traded with the Sumerians and other Mesopotamian cultures who were around at roughly the same time. They were also around at roughly the same time as ancient Egypt. So again, these are sort of neighbors to ancient Egypt, neighbors to Hammurabi and the Sumerians inventing their wheel over there and all these guys. This is what's going on in South Asia at the time. The Indus Valley Civilization are building cities like this. The city didn't look like this then. This is the modern day ruins of it. These walls had buildings attached to them. You can see here a well and a drainage ditch. Here's a little drawing of what it would have looked like back then. These were impressive, big cities for the time. Here's one of the artifacts that we got from Harappa, from one of the cities in the Indus Valley Civilization. We don't know anything about this other than what you see, right? We found this little sculpture in the ruins of this city. Who was this guy? What was his story? Kind of like we talked about in Chapter 1. We don't know any of that. All we can do is guess based on what you're looking at right here. In this slide, I'm calling the Indus Valley Civilization Harappans. Sometimes I'll use those terms interchangeably. Again, I'm talking here about the Indus Valley Civilization, the first civilization in this part of the world. Their cities were incredibly sophisticated in terms of sanitation system, right? In terms of the plumbing that they had in their cities. The plumbing that they had in these cities at this time are going to be the best plumbing that anyone has anywhere until a couple hundred years ago. Their plumbing system is even better than what Rome had. They had private bathrooms, they had showers. This at the time when the majority of the human population are still hunter-gatherers like North Sentinel Island people. The fact that these guys have private bathrooms in their homes is very impressive. This is another artifact from one of their cities, and we've actually found a lot of these. These are like seals on packages. These are sort of like almost like ancient packing slips, letting you know who sent a particular package of goods. And one of the very interesting things is you see these characters on the top here. This is their writing. They had a written language, but unlike cuneiform, unlike hieroglyphics, we cannot read it. Up until this day, even, this is indecipherable to us. We know it's their language, but we can't read it. Here's another little drawing from the Indus Valley Civilization, and one of the things that I think is fascinating about these guys is, again, because we can't read their writing, we're almost lost like we are with, cave paintings. We don't know what's going on in this picture. We don't know anything about their beliefs or their politics, even though we know that they had advanced cities. They had to have had advanced governments, currencies. They're trading with Hammurabi, for Pete's sake, but we know so little about them. Their streets are evenly laid out. Again, their cities are quite impressive for the time. A couple things that are a little bit interesting. There's no houses that you would consider palaces. There aren't buildings that are so much bigger and grander than other buildings. In places like Mesopotamia, you've got, the palace of the king is so much bigger than like a regular person's house. But in these cities, most of the houses are sort of roughly the same size. So what was going on with their government? Where were their rulers living if they weren't living in places that were so much bigger? We don't see a lot of images of warfare from them, and we see a lot of images of warfare in ancient Egypt and in ancient Mesopotamia. So what was going on? Did they not fight in wars, or did they do it but they just weren't as into it as the Egyptians were? We don't know because we can't read their writing. It's a little frustrating. But these are some of the very interesting, very different things about this society. And another reason we don't know what was going on here is because between 1900 and 1750 BCE, the civilization declined. You see here again one of their abandoned cities. These cities, we can tell from carbon dating and from the archaeological research we do, that these cities stop being inhabited. There's no longer people in them around this time. This is the cities start being abandoned. Why are they abandoned? That's a good question. It is possible that it had to do with these guys, because at roughly the same time, these cattle-herding people called the Aryans began migrating east. The Aryans settle in the north of India, and they establish a bunch of little kingdoms all around northern India. None of them are strong enough to unite the whole place. But by the 6th century, the Aryans have become the, again, dominant group up in the north. The Aryans bring with them their own culture, and one of the most important parts of that culture is the caste system, which is this social structure in which the society has deep divisions. The castes you had are the caste of priests, the castes of warriors, the castes of merchants, and then farmers, the sort of regular people. Here's a nice diagram of it. Again, the power increases the higher up of the caste you go, but of course the population increases the lower you go. That is to say, just like pretty much every social structure that we study, and just like in most social structures throughout time, there are fewer powerful, rich people and a great number of sort of regular folks. The untouchables weren't even considered in the caste system. They're supposed to be out of the caste entirely. And this caste system was very rigid. There was no moving up or down. Whichever caste you were born into, that's the caste that you can stay in. That's the only caste that you're supposed to associate with. You're only allowed to marry someone who is in the exact same caste as you. So if you're a peasant, there's no hope of, really working hard and, one day you'll be a rich person. No, you're going to be a peasant forever. The Aryans also brought with them Hinduism, their ancient religion, which becomes the dominant religion in India and remains so today. Hinduism has their own religious texts, just like many other religions do. And Hinduism believes in reincarnation, which is to say the rebirth of the soul. The idea is that after you die, you're reborn into a new person, and then you die, and then you're reborn again. And that actually ties in with the caste system a little bit, because they believed in karma, which is possibly a word that you're familiar with. The idea is that the good or bad deeds that you do in a life will determine your form in the next life. So you're going to be born the next life into the caste that you deserve. So if you're a peasant, you'd never get to be anything more than a peasant in this life. But, if you're a good person, then in the next life you can be reborn into a higher caste. And again, according to this belief, if you lead the perfect life, eventually you can escape reincarnation. That's kind of the goal. The goal is to lead a good life. You'll sort of climb up and up the caste system, and eventually once you leave the perfect life, you won't be reincarnated anymore. Again, this is a sort of ancient version of these beliefs. The practice of yoga also has roots in Hinduism. Yoga was supposed to be a process of meditation and exercising in order to, achieve sort of religious connection with, the holy deities. There are many Hindu gods. Hinduism is polytheistic. Three of the big ones are the three that I have listed here, but there are many more than this. There's one other major religion that comes out of ancient India that I want to discuss before the lecture's over, and that is Buddhism. The founder of Buddhism is a historical person. He was born the prince of a small country in northern India, so he led a very privileged life, but then the story goes that then he saw suffering. He witnessed suffering and death, and so at 29, he leaves his home, he leaves his family, trying to find the meaning of life. And then the broad outline of the story is he goes, he meditates under this tree, and he finds the answer. He achieves enlightenment, and he spends the rest of his life teaching and spreading his message to other people. And I will give you a brief summary of what that message was right now. So after he achieves enlightenment, the Buddha realizes that there are these four noble truths, and here they are right here. Noble truth number one is that ordinary life is full of suffering, that to live is to suffer. But then the important second noble truth is that suffering is caused by desire. Desire is the thing that causes suffering. So it logically leads to 3. The way to end suffering is to end desire. If you no longer want the $1 million, you will no longer suffer because you're not a millionaire. But of course, that's easier said than done, and the Buddha also laid out the way to achieve it, and that is to follow the Eightfold Path. Well, now, what's that? He had this whole big thing, but in my opinion, you could just sort of summarize this by saying he said to lead a good and modest life. To be a good person. If you're a good person, it'll get you there. But this is technically his steps towards achieving nirvana and all that. And that'll be it for today. I packed a lot into this lecture, I know, so you're probably going to have to go over it a couple times to make sure that you get everything. Again, the main things that you want to get here: the Indus Valley civilization are the first civilization in South Asia. Then the Aryans come in and sort of bring with them the caste system and Hinduism, which remain important parts of Indian history for a super long time. After all of that, the Buddha comes along and starts Buddhism that originates there in India as well.